Welcome to the Edition Wars podcast, where we discuss RPG ideas, compare notes, compare rules, establish some sacred cows, get rid of those cows, fight about what we think is best, and basically geek out over our favorite games. I'm one of your hosts, Sam Dillon.
And I'm Sam's co-host, Brandis Stoddard. And this episode, we're talking about saving throws.
Woo! Saving throws. All right, so we need to do a little bit of history, and then what's going to happen is Brandis has something he's going to wax eloquently about, and then I have something I'm going to wax eloquently about. And so we need to get past the initial growing pains of saving throws here real quick. So I will tell you the biggest growing pain of saving throws, and that is that in the 1974 AD&D, the little three little books edition. Printed in 1974, way back, first initial days. Half of the rules are based on chainmail, and they assumed you would be going to chainmail to look up these things. In this edition, saving throws are based on class and level, and dwarves are slightly better than everyone at those. And the saving throws are for a death ray or poison exposure, for wands, including polymorph and paralyzation, for turn to stone, for dragon breath, and for staves and spells. And all it says about this, it doesn't really say a ton about everything. All it says is first of all, it's listed under the alternative combat system. So it tells you to go to chainmail, to the chainmail rules, and use those. And then it gives this alternative combat system with the 2-hit matrix and all that we talked about in our last episodes. And under that portion, it says saving throw matrix, and it lists out everything, and it puts it all on a table. And then it says, failure to make the total indicated above results in the weapon having full effect. For example, if you're turned to stone, you will take full damage from a dragon's breath, etc., etc. It never tells you what kind of dice to roll. It never explicitly tells you should roll a d20 and you need to get this amount or higher. And because in chainmail, the saves, I think, are 2d6. You roll 2d6 in chainmail because you don't roll a 20-sided die in chainmail. So it comes here, it shows up, and you've got these numbers like 14, 15, and 16. That can't be a 2d6 roll, obviously. So it has to be a d20, but it never really spells it out anywhere. So that's the first thing. And this, of course, is a known problem with original D&D. So we'll skip over it because that's not really part of, that's just, it's sort of the quaint cuteness of or whatever of of that edition. But I do want to point out, though, again, here are the saves in this order: death ray or poison, wands, which include polymorph and paralyzation, stone, which means if effects that turn you to stone, dragon breath, and staves and spells. Okay. If you make your save against staves and spells, you don't actually escape all of the damage. You just it's basically a save for half, so you take half damage. Same with wands. Everything else, you either take it or you don't.
Is that true even of Dragon's Breath? You take no effect on a successful save?
It says, let's see. So. Okay, rolling the total indicated above or higher means for death ray, polymorph, paralyzation, stone, turn to stone, or spells, it had no effect. Or half effect from I had it backwards on my notes. Or you take half effect from poison and from dragon's breath. Oh no, yes, half, and for dragon's breath, yeah. And then it says wands of cold, fireball, lightning, and staves. See, here it contradicts itself, right? See, this is the problem with this edition.
Sure,
It says wands of cold, wands of fireballs, wands of lightning, etc., and staves are treated as indicated, but saving throws being made result in 1/2 damage. But earlier it said, against turn to stone and spell, If you save, it has no effect. So I think they didn't really quite know how they wanted to roll it. I think it was meaningful for it to be specific to the type of wand or the type of spell or whatever, and they just shortcutted it into 2 or 3 sentences, and it made it really confusing.
Well, I just want to say one thing in the partial defense of this situation. Tabletop game design had been invented.
5 minutes earlier. Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah.
No. I agree. I agree.
So maybe some lessons had to get ironed out. Not unfair.
Right. Yep. So let's move on then, because I don't want to beat up on the game. I think it was the early days, and those things got sort of ironed out. In the later supplements, they didn't really do much better, except when they would explain spell effects. And so that's the thing, is you really have to go to the spell effect or to the creature that's causing the effect, and then it'll say in that description what it is.
Yeah.
So
well, and the thing that has always struck me about this sort of big table full of numbers is that it is a big table of numbers.
Yes.
And even though, as compared to the attack matrices, where you have a sense of the narrative of, a fighter is just consistently better than a cleric, mage, or thief at attacking with a weapon. That's the clear narrative of the table.
Right.
And so on through the classes. This class is better than this one. This class is better than this one. And so I get that narrative. I look at this big table of numbers that are improving level over level, but because the table doesn't make it easy to see them in comparison to one another, I just get totally lost as to the narrative of who's supposed to be good at what, or why they would be good at that thing.
Yeah, it's not immediately obvious. For example, for Dragon Breath, for that save, the worst by far to begin with, between levels 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, are magic users and clerics, which have a 16 to save, both of them. And fighters have to roll a 15, so they're only slightly better. But by the time you get down to a 13th level fighter, their save for Dragon's Breath is only a 5. Whereas the magic user at a 16th level still has to roll an 8.
Yep.
But to pull that out of the table is quite difficult.
Right, and I have the first edition and second edition saving throw matrices open in front of me, and
it's at least organized differently.
It's organized differently, but the logic of who's good at what and when is just sort of, it's totally different from what you just said, for starters, and also it's totally different from the logic that drives saving throws in 5th edition, which is more similar to 3rd and 4th. Right. So I want to jump too far ahead, but I do want to just think about how what makes you good at breath weapons, for example, is just completely unclear to me.
Right.
I mean, I would have guessed that the narrative would be thieves are good at avoiding breath weapons because they're rolling out of the way, but that is not sustained as an idea.
Right. Well, so let's hop forward then to Holmes Basic, which is basically, it's a mimic of original edition, but it does change a little bit. The save is still based on class, but for example, the worst off at the beginning. First of all, it puts the saves in a different order, but spells or magic saves, the fighter is now the worst, with a 17 though instead of with a 16, so that's different. And all the way down the line, the best possible saves you can get for any of the 5 groups of saves is dwarf and halfling. They are the best at saving. And as you said, there's really no like the dwarves traditionally have, this resistance to magic or resistance to poison, but why are they better at dragon's breath? Why are they better at turning to stone?
I mean, I can make an argument for those, but it's going to be
arbitrary,
ex post facto,
right?
certainly.
Yeah, sure. So that doesn't change very much. And also to note, in Holmes Basic, I couldn't find anywhere where any ability scores adjusted how well you were able to perform your save or not.
Yeah.
And then we move on to, I'm just going to move very quickly through the basic editions because they don't change that much. But when we move to Moldvay Cook is 1981. You're still rolling a d20. You're still comparing it to a chart. In this case, Wisdom now will adjust your magic-based saves. So if you have a 13 to 15, you get a +1 to your save roll. 16, 17, you get a +2, et cetera, et cetera. Halflings and dwarves are still the best at everything, but everyone else is still pretty good. They're much better than previously. Previously, we were looking at 15s and 16s and 17s to save, and now we kind of start. There's a couple that are 16 for a couple of classes, but everybody's kind of shifted down to the 13 and 14 range, and those improve quite well across levels. And then the Mincer Red Box is basically the same. So that's 1983. This is the BECMI version of the game. Dwarves and halflings still the best at everything in terms of, because remember back then also race was class. So if you were a fighter, magic user, thief, you were a human. If you were a dwarf, you weren't a fighter, a magic user, a thief, right? You were a dwarf. If you were elf, you were an elf. That was your class and your race. So that's why I'm mentioning it that like this, because it's the same. Dwarves and halflings are the best at everything, and everyone else has. It shifts around a little bit, but it's not any humongous change until we get to first edition.
Well, hang on. So how does that intersect with the level limits on advancement? Do the dwarves and halflings just start strongest, but then also stop earliest?
Yes, because you hit a level cap, theoretically speaking. Yes, of course.
And when they hit that level cap, I assume that other classes surpass their saving throw totals.
That is a very good question. I feel like let's just pick one. Let's just stick with the Dragon Breath. Okay.
Sure.
Clerics between the levels of 1 and 4 have a Dragon Breath saving throw of 16. If they can get up to levels 33 to 36 and their save is down to 2. But let's look at like the 17 to 20 range. At 17 to 20, so let's say they're level 20, they have an 8 for the Dragon Breath. So it cut their save in half. If we look at fighters have a Dragon Breath at first to third levels of a 15. When they hit levels 20, it's a 6, and it's down to a 2 at level 34 to 36. If we look at a magic user, the breath attack is a 16 for levels 1 to 5. By the time they get to level 20, it's a 10, and it goes down to 2 at level 33 to 36. And the last of the humans, the thief, is a breath attack 16, levels 1 to 4. By the time they get to level 20, it's cut in half to 8, same as the cleric. And now if we look at a dwarf levels 1 to 3 has a Dragon Breath save of 13, and by the time they get to level 12, it's a 4, and then they're at their cap. An elf is a Dragon Breath 15, levels 1 to 3. By the time they get to level 10, it's a 3, and that's their cap. And then a halfling is breath attack 13 from 1 to 3, and by the time they get to level 8, it's a 5. So it does drop precipitously. They pretty much stay among the best. They're in the top 2 every time.
Right on. Okay. I just was sort of thinking about how for all the level limit sort of shuts the non-human characters out of late game play, however rare or common late game play may have been.
Right.
It's interesting that they stay competitive on saving throws.
Well, and I think the thing is that even though they don't progress in level, they still have all of their abilities that they had. And by the
sure.
time,
But
by the time you're a 10th level elf or a 12th level dwarf, I mean, you're, yeah, you're not going to get up to level 30, but, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, the thing is that they get so many good abilities early on. The level cap, I mean, this is a whole other episode, right? The level cap was really for, to keep it more balanced so that, the humans can keep progressing and,
I would definitely question whether that is the result that came out of it.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I think the intention is almost never what actually occurs, right?
Yeah, it just never incentivize some of the players to say, we're bored of this campaign, let's start a new one where we can advance.
Yeah. Or it just incentivized DMs to house rule
Right,
level advancement in demi-humans, right?
right.
So
We wrote this rule to incentivize you to ignore this rule. Okay.
don't tell me
That's
there
a
aren't
bold
rules
move.
like that. Don't tell me there aren't rules like that.
Oh no, sir. I have read many of them.
So let's look at first edition. So first edition.
Sure.
By the way, also in the basic editions, it does actually give you a description of what a saving throw is, and other than OE, right? Original edition didn't because it assumed you knew what it was because it's talked about in chainmail. Although even there, it doesn't really describe it very well. But in the basic editions, it actually says, this is to help you try to avoid damage for these magical effects or whatever. But it's only in first edition that it actually is described really well, or in a manner that it actually is a sensible manner. I don't know, sensible if that's the right. I don't know if that's the right word.
I mean, it's 7 paragraphs.
Yeah.
So.
Well, is it in the PHB or?
I'm looking
trying to
at the
remember.
first edition DMG.
Right. No, I got that. But in the player's handbook, I was looking to see what it actually said because I couldn't remember if it was even mentioned in there. I think it is mentioned just as a put this stat on your paper. Oh, here it is. Page 105. Okay, so yeah, that page 80 thing in the DMG, that's what I'm going to wax eloquently about in a minute. So here's what it says in the player's handbook regarding
Daniel-san, wax on.
regarding saving throws in the player's handbook. All it says, I mean, it's a paragraph, but it basically says you have a chance to avoid or partially negate some types of damage, and that's what a saving throw is. It's as very basic. It's in the combat section of the PHB. It's not really explored at all. However, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, Gygax waxes very eloquently. Here's what he says. He's talking about saving throws. He says, it represents the chance for the figure concerned to avoid, or at least partially avoid, the cruel results of fate. In AD&D, it is the same. He was referencing chainmail before. He says, in AD&D, it's the same. By means of skill, luck, magical protections, quirks of fate, and the aid of supernatural powers, the character making his or her saving throw takes none or only part of the indicated results. Fireball damage, poisoning, being turned to stone, or whatever. The various saving throws are shown on the appropriate tables, for characters, monsters, and items as well. When someone or something fails to roll the number shown, or better, whatever is coming comes in full. To better understand the concept of the saving throw, the following is offered. As has been pointed out, AD&D is a game wherein participants create personae and operate them in the milieu created and designed, in whole or in part, by the Dungeon Master, and shared by all, including the DM, in imagination and enthusiasm. The central theme of this game is the interaction of these personae, whether those of the players or those of the DM, with the milieu, including that part represented by the characters and creatures personified by the DM. Gotta breathe for that long-ass sentence. This interaction results in adventures and deeds of daring. The heroic fantasy which results is a blend of the dramatic and the comic, the foolish and the brave, stirring excitement and grinding boredom. It is a game in which the continuing epic is the most meaningful portion. It becomes an entity in which at least some of the characters seem to be able to survive for an indefinite time, and characters who have shorter spans of existence are linked one to the other by blood or purpose. These personae put up with the frustrations, the setbacks, and the tragedies because they aim for and can reasonably expect to achieve adventure, challenge, wealth, glory, and more. If player characters are not of the same stamp as Conan, they also appreciate that they are in effect writing their own adventures and creating their own legends, not merely reliving those of someone else's creation. Yet, because the player character is all-important, he or she must always, or nearly always, have a chance, no matter how small, a chance of somehow escaping what otherwise would be inevitable destruction. Many will not be able to do so, but the escapes of those who do are what the fabric of the game is created upon. These adventures become the twice-told tales and legends of the campaign. The fame or infamy of certain characters gives luster to the campaign and enjoyment to player and DM alike, as the parts grow and are entwined to become a fantastic history of a never-was world where all of us would wish to live, if we could. Someone once sharply criticized the concept of the saving throw as ridiculous. Could a man chained to a rock, they ask, save himself from the blast of a red dragon's breath? Why not? I replied. If you accept fire-breathing dragons, why doubt the chance to reduce the damage sustained from such a creature's attack? Imagine that the figure in the last moment, of course, manages to drop beneath the licking flames, or finds a crevice in which to shield his or her body, or succeeds in finding a way to be free of the fetters. Why not? The mechanics of combat or the details of the injury caused by some horrible weapon are not the key to heroic fantasy and adventure games. It is the character, how he or she becomes involved in the combat, how he or she somehow escapes, or fails to escape, the mortal threat which is important to the enjoyment and longevity of the game. Okay, I'm done. There's 3 more paragraphs. But that is the reason why Gary Gygax is both lauded and disdained for his writing style.
This is the weirdest place in the absolute world to put this essay. Right?
Yes.
Like, it would be no weirder to literally insert this as an entry in one of the tables than it is to put it here.
Yes.
What? Okay.
Well, that's why I said he waxes eloquently. This has nothing to do with the mechanics. This is a rationale by the designer in the combat section of the rulebook.
One other thing, I just want to point out that he says, with what one presumes is a straight face, that grinding boredom is an intended part of the game.
When does he say that?
Second paragraph. He's talking about the balance of forces. The foolish and the brave, stirring excitement and grinding boredom.
Yes, yes.
Really? Really? You're just gonna lay it on the table like that? Okay. That is... Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
And like, it's...
Well, I mean, what he's trying to do is he's trying to set it up as a game where there are ups and downs. And so it's rational and reasonable to have a saving throw mechanic in a game in which there are ups and downs. And sometimes, honestly, it's boring. That's what he's saying. And, but so, I mean, it's a whole other topic to talk about, Gygax advice. But,
It's true. Like, it isn't that I dislike this essay on what the game is about. Not at all.
Right.
It's got a lot to say, and it's clearly written from a place of passion.
Mm-hmm.
And other than maybe lionizing grinding boredom, I'm going to say that he's got a lot of really good points here.
Right.
But putting it where it is such a choice. And so that gets us into some of the other odd choices about saving throws and this book. First of which I'm going to say is sort of tucking this in practically amidst the psionics rules. But okay, fine. That's fine. That's a thing you can do. Starting saving throws have gotten substantially worse from what you read before in AD&D. Because, for example, here fighters save against breath weapons on a 20 at first level. Zeroth level, excuse me. So at first level,
They're still a 20.
17.
Oh, so
It's 17.
but they are the worst across the board. That in all. So by the way, they also changed the order of the categories of saving throws. Now it goes paralyzation, poison, or death magic. Then it goes petrification or polymorph. Then it goes rod, staff, or wand. Then breath weapon. Then spells. And the worst is fighters all the way down. Their high is the fighters are 16, 17, 18, 17, 19 to save, and their lows are not as good as some of the others. The best is different for each category. Clerics are the best at the first, paralyzation, poison. Thieves are the best at the next. Magic users are the best for the next three. But thieves overall actually have the worst progression. They do not go as low as any other class in any category. They were always the highest in every category at the end of their level progression.
Right, and making them bad at breath weapon saves is one of the most shocking things to me.
Right.
Because I think now of evasion, obviously, and the fact that rogues have become something approaching immune to that whole style of threat.
Right.
But the thing about fighters is that the fighters improve more times than anyone else. They start in the worst place, but they have more steps of improvement happening.
Right. The level spread between when their save changes is much smaller. I think it's it's 3 levels each time or 2 levels each time or something, and everyone else is 4 or 5.
Right, and they're also often stepping down by 2 points at a time instead of 1. So it's a steep improvement. And then the one last thing I want to say that I think is just really strange is that there's a completely different saving throw table for objects. It is so different in that it doesn't have even the same categories of things that can happen.
Right. No, it's like fire, acid, a crushing blow, a fall from a great height. Magical items get a bonus to the rolls, but it doesn't really say what.
Right.
Yeah, it's against the type of attack or something. Although it does, so the book, the DMG. So first of all, the player's handbook doesn't say hardly anything, but the first edition DMG says a couple of things that are interesting. It says it gives the DM the permission to assign a modifier to any saving throw as they see fit. It tells you then to keep in mind game balance, which I don't know where the hell you're right. Like that's like the boredom thing. Let's pull that out of our butt because nobody cared about. I mean, Gygax didn't care about game balance any other time. But anyway,
right.
The next thing is it says that some creatures modify the save. So a creature type can modify what the save is. If you want to, as the DM, you can use the player's Constitution modifier to help adjust a poison save, even though that's not on the table. Like poison is on the table, but the fact that con mod could change it is up to the DM. Wisdom modifiers, but only for mental attacks like charm and fear and illusion. And if your wisdom is high enough, you're actually immune to those. You don't even have to make a save. So there are a lot of little pieces of this in this edition where they really, they started to press on the levers and see how they could change the game with different little factoids. Oh, and also, this is the first edition where a roll of a 1 is always a failure.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, they were playing. There was a lot of levers going on here. I think the lesson was that in the original edition, it wasn't explicit enough what that was for. It was too loosey-goosey, and I think it's still relatively loosey-goosey here, but I think they were really trying to clean it up and make it a nice set of guidelines versus just, well, here's a table and do what you want.
All right, so I came up with more things I need to say about this. So, just thumbing through the first edition DMG, as one does, I came to, quite early in the book, a whole set of things that in later editions are going to be saving throws, but aren't in first edition. Disease and parasitic infestation. They don't involve saving throws at this point. They are percent chances.
Oh, so if you get exposed, this is your percent chance of actually catching it?
Exactly. You have a base 2% chance, and then here's a table of about 10 different modifiers, and then your chance of parasitic infestation, base 3% chance. Here's your table of modifiers, and then your tables of all the incredibly horrible, incredibly specific diseases that can happen to you.
Yeah.
And nary a saving throw was seen.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's something that's definitely going to change as the editions go on.
That was, you know what? If the player got close enough to touch something that had that disease, well, that's just what happens. It's not a condition to save against. It's that percentage chance is your save, but it's not really, because it's not using that language. It's not really a save.
Yeah.
Also, I think the DM rolls that percentage chance, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, because Gygax didn't want the player to have any way to know at the time whether or not they were infested with parasites.
Right.
And I can appreciate that decision, to be honest.
Sure. Well, this was still back in the time when, it was assumed that the DM knows all the rules and the players might not. They just show up and they get handed a piece of paper, or maybe they made their own character, but that's kind of it.
Well, I more mean to say that I have an appreciation for the almost gleeful sense of horrible things that happen to your character when you have the bold foolishness or the foolish boldness to go underground and try to get treasure. From the right mindset, that's a great feel for a game, and I've run games they're in that style, where sort of the slogan is, "I'm sure it's fine. It's probably fine.
Yeah.
It's probably fine."
I was talking about it more in the idea of appreciating the fact that he just rolled and determined whether the PC caught the disease, and then he would narrate the symptoms to the player. You feel this way, or you start to notice that the skin on your arm is hardening into scales, and things like that, and let the players figure out, oh, what did I contact, and what kind of disease did I contract because I was in that that rat hole. It's a style. It's definitely a style. It's a style. So, do you have anything else about first edition?
Not at the moment. I think that has me covered.
All right, Brandis. I know you want to talk about second edition.
Okay, so things are pretty similar between the first edition and second edition saving throw tables. I think most of the same trends are present. I'm not going through number by number to see that they're the same, but it is certainly still true that warriors start off the worst and end up either best or in very close competition for best.
And also, second edition, they did this priority thing, right? They changed the order of the categories a little bit, but then they also mention, they actually talk quite a bit about saving throws, and they mention that if there's more than one thing that could be affecting, that the PC might have to save against, that the way you figure it out which one to make them roll their save against is in this particular order. And so basically they call it the priority, right? So if more than one effect is going to hit that player because of some creature's attack or something, they only roll one save. But the way you determine which one they roll is the priority order that they give you, which I felt like was pretty clunky, actually.
I think that's pretty clunky. I do like that there is some way to determine what should happen with an ad hoc effect, but in printed adventures, it's you're absolutely just going to be told what to roll, regardless of what the sort of suggested saving throw would be. Like a bunch of rocks falling from the ceiling, what do you roll for that? Well, it just depends on what the module writer felt like. That's really the only logic to it. I think often as not, the answer is going to be paralyzation, poison, or death magic, and I couldn't tell you why. No idea.
Yeah, no clue.
Um,
But I'll tell you what,
so
priests are the best at that. They start with a 10.
sure, that's
It's
amazing.
amazing.
That's
Yeah,
great for them.
it's amazing.
What's the narrative to that, please? What narrative we saw?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, and so remember also now we're talking about priests, wizards, rogues, and warriors because the
Right.
subclasses are now under those categories. So when I say priest, that's not just one class. That's the class of priests, which include
Yep.
clerics and druids and whatever. And so you end up with this whole set of people that suddenly somehow are really good at withstanding death magic and poison and paralyzation, which I don't know the connection there. Yeah, there's
Sure.
really no narrative reason. I mean, I don't so I could think up arbitrary narrative reasons for any of this, but none of it is written in the rules.
Not at all. So that's the first thing I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
The next is that when you get into the text discussing what each saving throw is about, which you would hope would carry some narrative, it save versus breath weapon says that. Let's see. This save can also be used in situations where a combination of physical stamina and dexterity are critical factors in survival. That's interesting. Go ahead and tell me how dexterity affects this saving throw, Sam.
Well,
Are those crickets I hear, Sam? Are those crickets?
well, so here's what the modification says. It says there is a defensive adjustment if your dexterity is high enough that is applied to saves against attacks that can be dodged.
Does it say that? Let me.
Yeah, and it ranges from a -1 to your save requirement if you have a 15 dex, up to -4 if you have
Okay.
an 18 dex.
Okay. Okay.
But it does not specifically say breath weapon. It just
Right.
says
Lightning
attacks
bolts. That's
that can
spells.
be dodged. Right. Also, your con will affect your save versus poison, but your ability score for that has to be a 19.
Right. Good luck.
And your wisdom can help you because it also has a defense adjustment. And this is where if it's high enough you're immune. So I misspoke. I said that was first edition. I don't think that's true. I think it's this edition. It's second edition.
Right. If you find a way to crank your wisdom up to 19 or better, you start becoming immune to some really great stuff.
Right. But if it's 18, you still get like a +4 or something to it. So
That's really nice.
that's pretty
Yeah.
darn good. Yeah. Because I mean, think about it. If your wisdom's 18 and you're a priest, you're already starting with a 10. You're
Yeah.
going to have a 6 saving throw against poison, paralyzation, and death magic.
Yep.
That's amazing because your warrior, your fighter over there, he's got to roll a 16.
Right. Sucker. The other thing about this edition, when you look at both the enormous amount of spells that were published, and then all the different, monster stat blocks and adventures and so on, saving throw penalties of -1 to -4 that are just inherent to the effect
Right.
are super common.
Super common. Yep, exactly. Well, and that's what I was going to say. Also, magic items can modify this.
Yep.
Creature type can modify it. Creature damage type can modify it. I mean, that's why I was saying, at the end of, when you go through that first edition stuff and you listen to Gygax wax eloquently, but then you realize, hey, they're really starting to play around with some of these, with the wisdom modifier and with the different, con modifier and all that stuff. And they're still leaving it up to the DM a great deal and not really codifying it so strictly, but they're really playing with it. By second edition, oh man, they figured out in between those editions, I can really make this creature have something that is really tough to combat, right? I can make them have this save that you have to do when they attack. And, as we see, most classes are not that great at saves until they get to really high level.
Right. You don't become indestructible till you're otherwise also indestructible.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If you lived that long, good for you, because I didn't have very many characters live that long in this edition.
Yeah. In fairness, one imagines that a lot of the saving throws are going to come up a lot more often at mid to high levels. than they do at low levels. I mean, how much death magic actually gets thrown around before 5th level?
No, but lots of, poison, right? In fact, the last second edition game I ran, I accidentally killed somebody in the second session because, granted, they started at 5th level, okay, but I accidentally killed him because they ran into some poisonous snakes, and I had him roll the type of poison after he got bit. I didn't expect them to get bit. It was kind of this weird situation, but after he got bit, I had him roll the strength of the poison type, and he rolled a 20, which is death. And so he was like, oh, I'm rolling, oh, and he got so happy because he rolled a 20, except he was rolling for the poison, so it killed him in 6 turns.
Wow, harsh.
No save. I know. So that, I mean, he failed his save, right? I mean, he did get a save, but he failed it. So, I mean, you're right, but there are several saber suck situations that could come up, actually, even at lower levels. So some of these saves, death magic, okay, I'm not going to throw death magic at first level characters, but
But paralyzation can definitely come up because hold person is a 2nd level spell.
Absolutely. And I don't know. I don't remember if ghouls still paralyze in this edition, but
Oh, do they? Oh boy.
Back in Basic, they would paralyze you and then they would eat you.
As far as I know, there's not an edition of D&D where ghouls do not paralyze your ass.
Yeah.
Yep. Good times.
Good times. So that brings us into 3rd edition.
Yes, it does.
Where they really have fully realized all of the levers that can be pulled to adjust saves and that sort of thing.
Right, and I think what you see with the sort of inversion of the system is just a desire to have roughly the same level of tension in this saving throw roll at most levels of play, right?
Yes.
So your bonus goes up, but so does your difficulty class. So to take this from the top and actually explain it, what happens in 3rd edition is that instead of these 5 categories of saving throw, we go down to 3 categories of saving throw: fortitude, reflex, and will. So if you are listening to an actual play stream or podcast, and you hear the DM, who is now running 5th edition, mysteriously call for a will save when he means a wisdom save, it's because he ran a lot of 3rd edition or 4th edition or what have you. So the approach to improvement has changed a fair bit. Each class is essentially either good or bad at each of those categories of saving throw, and then you get a base bonus that starts at either +0 or +2, and over the course of play scales up to either +6 or +12.
So when someone rolls a save, they roll a d20, and they add their base save for that particular defense, and that base save is based on class. And then they might have a racial bonus that they add. If it's fortitude, they add their constitution modifier. If it's a reflex, they add their dexterity modifier. And if it's will, they add their wisdom modifier. They also might have a resistance bonus if you're using a later build, or maybe some of the prestige classes.
Maybe a cloak of resistance.
Right. There are other things like magic items that can affect that. And so you're rolling a d20, but then you have all of these extra bonuses on top, in addition to your base save bonus and your ability modifier. So, as you said, you're rolling to beat a DC. You're not rolling to beat the number that you have. So you don't roll to beat your base save bonus plus your con mod plus the racial bonus or whatever. You're adding all those things to your d20 roll in order to beat the DC. Now, they did fold these down into 3 categories, but then they give examples of what you're saving against when you're using one of these. So let me just give you that real quick. For example, fortitude is used to save against poison, disease, paralysis, petrification, energy drain, and disintegrate spells. Reflex is used to save against falling in a pit trap, catching on fire, being able to dodge a lightning bolt, and escaping dragon breath. And a will would be used to save against a charm person, hold person, or illusion-based spell. They kept up the natural 1 always failing, and they also added that a natural 20 always succeeds.
Right on.
But the DC otherwise is just going to exponentially rise based on, what the situation is. So that the higher level character, 12th level character, is going to have, they're not going to be facing something that's probably going to have them need to pass a save with a DC of 5, right? The DC is going to also increase.
Yep, and so you get into a default way of calculating the DC for spells, and then non-spell class features and such, and monster features that need a DC tend to have a fairly similar but not identical means of calculating the DC.
Yeah, it's like 10 plus the level plus creature's racial modifier or sometimes an ability, right? Then there are also, there's also like feats or special abilities you can have that allow you to try to save, like evasion, right? Lets you avoid an area of attack spell.
Yep.
Metal lets you shrug off magical effects or something like that. Metal, is it metal? I can't remember if I'm thinking of 3rd edition or not.
Metal is the fortitude version of evasion.
Okay, yeah. So there you go. Yeah, and so for like saving against a magic item is 10 plus 1.5 times the level of the spell effect that's on the magic. I mean, like it's a calculation.
Yep.
But the calculation is done for before you meet that thing. You don't sit down and have a little math party. Well, I don't know. I guess in some groups you did. But if you're the DM, you're doing that calculation beforehand, so you know what that save DC is going to be.
Right.
And then you tell the player, okay, I need a fort save from you. Yep. And then they roll that, which is very different from the previous editions where either the player or the DM rolled, and the roll was a d20, and you rolled to beat whatever your own personal save value was. It had nothing to do really with the level of the spell or the level of the creature or the level of the effect, except in 2nd edition when they started fiddling with what the creatures could do.
Right. And then because DCs work this way, and because there are so many spells that completely incapacitate a target if it fails its save, the save or suck situation that you mentioned just a moment ago, this creates a very involved arms race in creature design. Because suddenly magic resistance, spell resistance becomes a sort of parallel arms race, and I feel like this might be an okay time to toss off a mention of how magic resistance worked in
Sure.
2nd edition. I don't know off the top of my head how it worked before that, but it was a flat percentage roll to just completely shed whatever the incoming magical effect was. Well, in 3rd edition, it's a d20 roll, like you'd expect for something that touted itself as the d20 system, and it works more or less like an attack roll against the target creature's spell resistance number. And so you've got, like I said, a whole separate arms race of feats to improve your spell penetration and feats to improve spell resistance. And this all comes down to the fact that the attacker wants to disable the target in a single spell or effect, and the target would not like to be disabled in a single spell or effect. Thank you kindly.
And so a save, if I can interrupt you for a second, there are several things that succeeding on a save could do. It could negate the effect entirely. It could provide you with only a partial effect, so that's kind of like the save for half damage thing. It could allow you to disbelieve in an illusion of some sort, or it could render an object's effect harmless on you. But also, some things later on could actually have no save allowed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, that arms race actually had, in some cases, it went to an exponential endpoint where there really is no save. Forget the race is over, the creature won, you get no save. If they succeed, then that's what it is.
Wasn't Maze like that?
I don't know.
But yes, that becomes a very central dynamic of the game, especially as there are more spellcasting classes in 3rd edition than there were in any prior edition.
Right. And just as you get more and more splat books with more and more really awesome feats and more really awesome prestige classes, and it becomes amazing. And at the same time, there are some things that are just become unwieldy. Which brings us to some changes they made in 4th edition, unless there was anything else you had about 3rd edition.
No, I think I'm good on 3rd. Go ahead.
So in 4th edition, they changed everything once again to be something completely different. So saving throws are now defenses. So the fortitude, the reflex, and the will are now akin to armor class. They are defenses that are rolled against by an enemy who wants to attack you. And characters, depending on their class and sometimes their race, could get a bonus to that defense, just like they get bonuses to AC for various different reasons. But the saving throw itself then, so those things are no longer actually saving throws, they are defenses. So the saving throw itself is now a D20 roll, and the DC is 10. So if you get a 10 or higher, and it's unmodified mostly, there were a few feats that, at least at the beginning, there were a few feats that let you modify it. You have a 55% chance, basically, because you get a 10 or higher, that's a 55% chance, and every save is like that. And the saves don't stop you from being affected by something, but they will end an effect that is already on you, or a condition. So, in 4th edition, you had different conditions, like you could be taking ongoing damage, you could be poisoned, and so you could be slowed, or something like that. But you're already suffering from that effect when you make the save, because the save is made at the end of the turn. So in previous editions, saving throws would allow you to either negate an effect or escape half of it or something, and then it's done, and then you wouldn't have to roll that again unless you got hit with that attack again. In 4th edition, if you were hit with an effect, a lot of times that effect would hang around until you made your save.
Yep. Which made for a very clear way to inflict ongoing damage round over round, such as bleeds and poisons.
Sure. And they also introduced into the game something called a death saving throw, where if you drop to 0 or less, or fewer, 0 or fewer hit points, every turn at the end of your turn, you have to roll basically for your turn, really, you're rolling a death save. If you roll less than 10, you failed your death save. If you do that 3 times in a day without taking a long rest in between, you are dead.
I appreciate your dedication to recognizing hit points as a countable object grammatically. That's very good.
Thank you. If you roll a 10 to 19 on that death save, there's no change, but you don't get closer to death, but you don't actually improve any. And if you roll a 20, something miraculous happens, and you might get a quarter of your hit points back if you have any things called healing surges left, which is probably a topic for a different episode. But it was a resource that every character had some of, and if you had at least one left, if you rolled a 20 while you were doing a death save, it would actually pop you back up into a relatively healthy position, as if you had cast a healing spell upon yourself. So those are saves. So saves became something to end an effect, not to help you avoid an effect, and they also became something that was also related to death or avoiding that death.
Right, and I mean, it really matters that you have fortitude, reflex, and will as values that can be attacked instead of saving throws in 4th edition, because for the first time in the whole of D&D, a fireball can crit.
Right. Yes.
And that is just this enormous sort of change in thinking. And so I sort of want to fold those into talking about saving throws more completely, because there are powers running around in the vast continuum of 4th edition powers that apply, bonuses or penalties to other characters' fortitude, reflex, and will defenses, and also to any saving throws they roll.
Right.
One of the really big early combos was using, I want to say it was an Orb of Imposition, which is a magic item almost only usable by wizards, that would let them apply a saving throw penalty to a creature and thus make some of their control effects stick around a lot longer. Well, this matters a mighty lot when elites and solos, which are monster types, have a flat bonus to saving throws so that they will shake off those effects more quickly. And because there are some very, very difficult and confining effects that will just completely take a monster out of a fight available to PCs throughout much of the game, that was part of the monster design answer to that, was to give them this bonus to saves. And so they also, folded in the arms race on the other side. And I keep calling it arms race in a dismissive way. That's not really fair. It's more sort of play and counterplay, and it's what you'd expect. I don't actually think there's anything wrong with it, though I do think that it's not too hard to get to a place in table culture where it is overwhelming the rest of the game and it's just becoming too much of the dynamic.
Sure. I mean, we talked about this last episode in the fact that 3rd edition was a system that heavily rewarded system mastery. The better you were at knowing the system, the more tweaks you could make, the more combos you could figure out, the better you can use the resources and skills and abilities available to your PC. And the same is true of 4th edition in several ways. And one of those ways is figuring out what are the best powers and what are the best feats to use to accommodate that arms race, right? To make that arms race so that you're the one winning it versus the creatures winning it. And I agree. I think the term arms race kind of sounds derogatory, but I don't particularly mean it in a derogatory manner. It's just what it is. That is what the game was. And that doesn't mean that every single person who ever played it played that way. I know several people who did not, and it was more about the role playing and having fun. And yeah, sometimes you beat down some monsters, but it wasn't all about the best combos ever. But it doesn't have to be, right? Because we're talking about design and how they changed things and what effects those had. And the effect is there is now a distinct arms race. There was in 3rd edition as well. So they didn't lose the arms race. They didn't drop off that part of the design when they made these changes. They just changed the way the arms races run.
For sure. I absolutely agree with that.
And honestly, the thing is that having in 4th edition, having a saving throw that's only a 10, and it's a 10 no matter what, there's a pretty good chance you're going to make your save. I mean, it's not, it feels at the table like, oh, it's not that hard to roll a 10,
No, I mean, it's a 55% pass chance.
Yeah, it's more than 50%. But at the same time, when you're talking about, well, what about the older editions when you only had to roll a 4 on a d20? Then now it's a much better. Now you have an 80% chance, right? And so it didn't scale in that way. Saving throws did not scale for you. What was in the arms race were the fortitude, reflex, and will, and the ability to do things to other creatures against those particular defenses, but it didn't change the save, So the saving throws, in other words, in 4th edition became something very different.
For sure. And in addition to the bonuses to saving throws that I mentioned, granting additional saving throws, just here, have another chance to pass your save when it isn't the end of your turn, is a huge part of leader play.
Right. Like not having to wait till the end of your turn to make your save was a boon.
Oh yeah. That was a central feature of the Warden class.
So very, very kind of different feel, though, from, it really did change the game a lot in terms of that, in terms of saves.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about 5th edition?
I think we're ready to talk about 5th edition.
All right, let's talk about it.
So, saving throws in 5th edition, we've done away with fortitude, reflex, and will. Those are essentially gone as concepts, sorta. So what happens is there's a separate saving throw for every ability score. So you have a strength saving throw, a dexterity saving throw, and so on. But dexterity, constitution, and wisdom are, especially in the initial release, by far and away the most common saving throws, while strength, intelligence, and charisma come up a lot less. And that preeminence has gotten eroded as things have gone on, but every class at base is going to be proficient. You're going to get to apply its proficiency bonus to 2 of those types of saves. And it's always going to be one of the preeminent saves and one of the lesser saves. If I can call it lesser. The things that a failed charisma save can do to you are still terrible, so you still
could say secondary saves, not lesser or whatever. Yeah.
And then you can buy additional proficient saves with the resilient feat, and monks eventually get proficiency in all saving throws, and so on. And death saving throws are still a thing. The one big difference is that you have an actual benefit to passing 3 death saving throws. Once you pass 3 times, you're stable. And that's a pretty big deal. So
basically, mapping the saves back to the ability scores or the abilities themselves, sort of, it feels like it harkens back to, let me put it this way. A lot of times when you're looking at your ability scores, you're really not looking at your ability score, you're looking at your modifier. And so the question has come up amongst players here and there for as long as I can remember, pretty much. Why do we even care about the ability score? Why not just have a modifier there? And in this way, it sort of makes, in a teeny tiny way, it makes the ability, 5th edition did this in other ways as well, but it makes the ability score kind of matter, because it matters what your bonus is, what your modifier is to that ability score, because it affects your saves directly, not just in some abstract, well, dexterity kind of affects, breath weapon kind of, and constitution might affect poison, and this sort of almost ambiguous connection. There's a very distinct direct connection, even if it's only in the name, if you know what I mean.
Sure. It's still driven by your modifier rather than the score.
Right. Sure, it is. But because we call them dexterity saves and we call them constitution saves and we're calling it the attribute name, so it feels like it's related to the attribute more so than when you say make a save versus spells, make a save versus breath weapon, make a save versus paralyzation.
Right. And I definitely think that for ease of entry, the game benefits quite substantially from not having to explain the ability scores and then separately explain what a fortitude saving throw is. You really just have to explain what constitution is, and it's right there.
And language matters, right? Ultimately language matters. And even if it's a tiny change, and it doesn't really change the basis of the mechanic, it does change the way that it's presented. And I run games with a lot of new players. And when you're trying to explain something to new players, that feels very disconnected, and it feels like, what some people would say a mini game, right? Like figuring out what your, fortitude, reflex, and will save is, and how to determine that, and all that stuff. That's like a little mini game in third and fourth edition, right? Whereas here, it seems like it's directly connected to the attributes just because of the name, and that's a big deal because it makes it feel more cohesive.
Well, and there are far fewer ways to modify those values, and I think that really cuts a lot of the arms race out of the game's dynamic, which is very friendly to new players. System mastery is greatly deprioritized.
Well, and bounded your beloved bounded accuracy.
My beloved
Your
bounded
your
accuracy.
beloved bounded accuracy also affects saves because it's tied to the proficiency, and proficiency is tied to class level, and everybody's proficiency rises at the same rate, relatively speaking. So, everybody who's first level is going to have a proficiency of +2 no matter what. Everybody with, 7th level is going to have a proficiency of +3 no matter what. And that's basically true for everything, and that includes the saves. So if your proficiency is a +3, whatever your 2 saves that you're very good at, those also get your proficiency, but it's the same proficiency that everybody else is getting at that level.
And there's you can only have so much of a spread between your best save and your worst save. That was true in third edition also, and interestingly to me, the spread wound up in the same 6-point place, right? I think that's interesting and sort of retroactively worthwhile, but in third edition you could so easily get into a place where you're only going to save on a 20, or you're only going to fail on a 1. That is very near to impossible, though not technically quite impossible in 5th edition. It's very improbable.
Yeah, you would have to make some very specific choices, and have some very specific circumstances arise for you to be able to make that happen.
DCs can go above 20, but it's not on the monster progression chart. The DM would have to just decide that, and a player can potentially push their saving throw DC above 20. Notably, this is part of Critical Role, because they talk about the DCs that are tossing around, and because Matt creates situations where ability scores are going above 20, then DCs are going above 20. That's just as part of the game he wants to run. But in core 5th edition, unless you start talking about tomes of various kinds, or the barbarian feature that grants +4 to strength and con, you have a base of 8 plus 5 for a stat plus 6 for proficiency bonus. That's 19. That's a very firm 19. So there you are.
And and you're talking about tomes and stuff, and there aren't that many magic items that actually grant a bonus or an increase to an attribute,
right,
or
there are
to
extremely
save.
few.
Yeah, there's very, very few. I think there's one tome for 5 of the 6 attributes. I mean, there's one tome each, so there's like a tome of wisdom, and there's a tome for intelligence. That's not its name, but it's
right.
It basically, what it does is allow you to use it to study, and it will then over time or through some magical means increase that attribute by 1, and that's it. You're done. Like that. So even if you had already maxed out that attribute at a 20, you might edge up to a 21, and there might be a circumstance that occurs in a game that would let you get to a 22. But I mean, really, that is so very rare. I just 5th edition is not a game that really encourages dungeon masters to set up situations where there's a tome of fighting over here, and there's a tome of wisdom over here, and there's that's not generally how the game is set up. It's not really set up to encourage. Despite the default setting being really high magic, it doesn't actually encourage extreme magic items.
Right. I definitely agree with that. I mean, attunement is such a break on stacking up lots of magic items, but I mean, you can be in a game that hands out a bunch of legendary items all at once. I'm playing in one right now. It's had some interesting, unusual effects, among other things, because this is still happening at fairly low level. It means that it's very difficult for the DM to get us interested in changing up our magic items, which means that it's more difficult to, make us care about the thing we just found. And I don't want to slag on it. That's not my point here. It's an effect that the DM certainly understands, and has done with intent and understanding. But it's the effect.
Right. But that's, I mean, so yeah, and my point wasn't that it's not possible to do those things or set up a campaign like that. My point was it's a very different, rules encourage a certain style of play or sort of point specifically new players, especially in a certain direction in terms of style of play. For example, having things like the three pillars be very explicitly talked about, in the rules, and it makes it so that even though a large portion of the book is set up to describe combat and equipment is really combat focused and all that sort of stuff, you still, because you're describing it as a game with combat and exploration and social interaction, that makes it part of the main basis of the game, all three of those things. And it's possible for a rule book to be written in a way that encourages a certain set of play styles. And it doesn't mean that no one ever goes outside of those. It just means that the rules, the way that they're written, they really encourage a certain way. And one of the things that 5th edition does is it doesn't actually encourage a really high a campaign laden with a ton of magic items. It doesn't mean it can't happen.
Sure.
In fact, the attunement and what you're talking about actually sounds like an interesting problem to have, right? Like it almost sounds like, wow, something's going on, and it's really this weird thing. But as a PC, I can only attune to 3 things, and this is very odd. Like, what's happening to magic in the world? Like I would be completely curious about what's going on here. Yeah, you're gonna have to convince me to get rid of my currently attuned items. That's actually a story driver. That I would turn that into a story driver.
Oh, for sure. I mean, what's happening is we're exploring a workshop where a bunch of wizards created powerful magic items.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's right up front, and we knew that kind of thing was going to happen. But not a lot of 5th level wizards have a Tome of the Still Tongue, I will tell you right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're way off track now. So, what are your final thoughts on saving throws?
Well, so the growth of the system is from, in this case, something where a PC can, look at their sheet and their die roll and know whether they've passed or failed, but not have a clear narrative of what the number signified, or really any attachment to what this column of numbers in their sheet meant, aside from, I need to roll over this to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, tell me which thing, and we're good. That shifts over to a much clearer narrative, but they don't know, based on their die result, whether they've passed or failed, unless the DM has told them the DC ahead of time. And that's similar enough to the dynamic around attack tables and armor class to be part of the same discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly saving throws are the flip side of the coin to attack rolls. I mean, an attack roll is the spellcaster. The saving throw is the spellcaster's attack roll,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. You do get spell attacks or range touch attacks, depending on edition. But the saving throw is the caster's attempt to control the situation for the most part, whether that's trying to deal a bunch of damage with a fireball, or lock down the room with a hold person, or whatever. So, I mean, that's essentially where things land in 5th edition. 5th edition also cuts way, way back on save or suck as a concept for spells, because you do get a fresh saving throw. That's not a 10 or better roll, but the same saving throw you made to try to resist it in the first place at the end of each of your turns. And so that is how the sort of dynamic of casters versus defenders evolves.
Yeah. I think the evolution of saving throws is sort of one of the more interesting evolutions throughout the different editions. It's almost a concept that is. It was almost presented as, well, I'll give you this bonus chance to maybe avoid death this time, and it's almost like a favor that the DM is giving to the player to allow their PC to possibly survive something horrible. And it's evolved into, as you said, a sort of more, you can actually have a more narrative type of interaction with the saving throw, and it feels more now in 5th edition. It feels like it's more in the hands of the players. It's more about the players. It's because of that thing about it being connected to ability scores. It feels like it's in the players' control almost, and it's less about a bonus chance that the DM is giving you, or that the circumstance or that the world is giving you, and it's more about utilizing the gifts and resources and abilities you have as a player character, which then allows the player to feel more ownership. And once again, it's not that you couldn't feel that way in the previous editions, it's just that the system wasn't stated and set up and described that way. It was described as something is happening to the PC, and the PC might have a chance to rescue themselves from that if they roll a really good number on this D20. Whereas now it feels more like, well, here's the situation and you can react, and you might have a chance to use your own internal abilities to fight off that effect or to escape that particular circumstance that's occurring. And it feels like it's more in the player's hands or in the PC's hands. And I like that change. I like that evolution.
I think the big change there, to my mind, is just how likely the thing is to happen or not. I mean, the likelihood of a spell taking effect is reasonably close to the likelihood of an attack landing, which is why it's a base of 8 plus everything. It's to generate that result. I think that in those earlier editions, it was much more, you're probably dead. You're probably dead.
Right.
But let's see if you get super lucky. Unless you happen to survive to high levels. But that's sort of one of the things that emerges to me when I have talked to OSR folks and serious devotees of early editions, such as yourself. There's much more a sense of, like, if you have to make a saving throw in the first place, you may have screwed up, because if you even have to ask the question of whether or not the Medusa's petrifying gaze affects you, you probably already goofed and you should have handled that fight differently. And that's just not the sense of things in 3rd edition and 4th edition and 5th edition.
Right. Yeah, it is. That is true. It's part of sort of the the old school mentality of it, part of the game itself. So I can sum up some comparison things really quickly with the way the game is played. In the old school, the characters were never that powerful. Until really high levels, the characters were never that powerful. So it was really a resource management, press your luck game. And if you ran into a case where you're having to roll a save, yeah, you probably pressed your luck a little too far and you might not survive. But that was part of the game, and that was part of the exploration and part of the fun of it, frankly, was trying to figure out how much you can push and not ever accidentally hit the big red button and, be gone. Whereas in, the later editions, starting sort of in second, but really, really in third and fourth and fifth, the game of the game in terms of player is about building the character, right? At least in the beginning. At least in third and fourth. It's about building your character so that you never have to do the save or suck thing, right? That's the game there. Your resource management and your designing the character to do the things you want and all of that stuff is happening on the front end. And then when you play, they're already powerful enough to deal with those things in a lot of cases.
Right. In theory, you're thumbing the scale enough to get through.
Exactly. And so, so the resource management part of the game and the press your luck part of the game is a different beast in the later, the more modern editions than it is in the earlier editions. And that's just part of the evolution of it. That's part of the reason I think it's so fascinating, because I do love the old school style. I love that push your luck style of game and the sort of, puzzle solving or, save or die kind of things going on. If you know that that's the expectation and that's how you're going to play, it's a great deal of fun. I also enjoy modern editions, right? So I also enjoy the character building and the trying to make it and trying to figure out, what can I do to make this a really cool character, and I can narrate things and I can have this really interesting characterization and persona, but also I want to be mechanically effective. I want to be able to do those things where I don't have to save or suck. And I find both of those really enjoyable. So so that's part of the reason why I like this podcast, is I like looking at through all the editions and thinking, wow, those some little tiny changes that occurred, in from one basic edition to the next, or from OE to basic into first edition. And then all of a sudden, much bigger changes in second edition, and then huge, amazing, emerging giant changes in third. And then fourth kind of completely flopped everything on its head. And then fifth is really trying to, at least I think, the way that I conceive of how the designers did fifth edition, what they did to saving throws in fifth edition. I feel like they're trying to strike the best balance between the previous older editions and how they conceived of saves versus the more modern editions. And I think they struck a pretty good balance myself.
I don't think I could be too much happier with this element of 5th edition. There are things in 5th edition I could be happier with, but it's fine.
Let's round this up. Those are your final thoughts. Those are my final thoughts. Where are you on the internet? Where are you online?
All right, so my personal blog is brandastoddard.com. You can find me on Twitter at brandastoddard. I also write for tribality.com.
I'm Sam Dillon, and you can find me on Twitter at DMSamuel, and you can find me on all over the Tome Show, and you can find me right here on the Edition Wars podcast. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will talk to you later.